Hello, and welcome to Beyond Biotech, the weekly podcast from Labiotech. I'm Dylan Kassane, and this is episode 162 for the podcast. Parkinson's disease impacts some 10 million people worldwide, and current approaches to treating the condition almost exclusively focus on addressing symptoms. There is, as of yet, no cure. One Finnish biotech, however, is not focused on alleviating symptoms, but on modifying the course of the disease itself. Their hope is to be able to stop and even reverse neurodegenerative diseases like Parkinson's, and they have the backing of significant players, such as the Michael J. Fox Foundation, to do just that. This week, I spoke to Antti Vuolanto, CEO of Herantis Pharma, about the work his company is doing, the science behind their approach, and the advantages and challenges of working in biotech in the Nordics. I hope you enjoy our conversation. Antti, welcome to Beyond Biotech.
Thank you.
Antti, can you start by telling me a little bit about your background, your career journey, all the way to where you are now, the CEO of Herantis Pharma? I mean, what drew you to this industry in the first place?
Yes, originally I studied actually chemistry at Technical University, and that was a very, very long time ago. I made a PhD and did actually some systems biology early in my career, switched to in vitro diagnostics. But then I got a very interesting opportunity to be a founder of an immuno-oncology company with a couple of my old friends, and that was back in 2008. And we started a company for developing oncolytic viruses, so virus particles that specifically would, target and kill tumor cells. And that was the start of my, a pharma career. And we started that company from the scratch. So in that environment, we were able to do the necessary preclinical, clinical work and build the whole company truly from scratch, hiring people for preclinical work, clinical work, and starting clinical studies in Europe and in US as well. So that was a very steep learning curve, and ever since I've felt that my real ambition is to help people and find new treatments for those ones who are with unmet clinical need. So that's been a very nice journey, and I've actually had all the different roles that you can imagine, with operational roles and part of financing and partnering and stuff like that. So it's been extremely motivating to see these projects from different angles and understand the complexity of bringing new therapeutics. Actually, none of these therapeutics I've been working with has been on the market, but late stage clinical development anyway. And I'm currently really happy that I'm being able to be part of a company who is really addressing a major unmet clinical need with Parkinson's disease and neurodegeneration. So.
Yeah. Antti, you said you've held different positions at these different companies. Does that impact how you lead the team now at Herantis, having looked at it from different perspectives and different points of view?
I believe so because I think I have seen very intimately and in practical terms what does it mean to do CMC manufacturing, preclinical work, clinical work, and how difficult or challenging it is to find financing and how to build everything together to have a good plan, and how what are the ingredients and what kind of talents and people we need to have involved and have a balanced team to address these very different aspects in the development. So at least I honestly hope that I'm able to bring the experience with me and in such a way like encourage and coach people towards the common goal there.
Herantis is based in Finland, and we haven't talked to anyone from Finland on the podcast since way back in episode 14, back in 2022. Can you describe the biotech environment in the Nordics? What advantages does it have for companies like Herantis?
Yeah, so Finland and the Nordics in general, they are a bit different. So if we first look at the Nordic countries, Sweden, Denmark, especially, they have a very strong history and background in drug development and pharmaceutical industry, and they have a lot of biotech startups or small development companies, even listed companies. But in Finland, the ecosystem is much more like thin. So we have maybe a handful of drug development companies who are doing, let's say, later stage, saying like phase 2 and onwards type of a development. So it's in a way an emerging field. In a way, it's a bit surprising because the academic research is actually pretty high level and very advanced in across many medical indications and areas. But the transformation from the academic research into drug development, commercialization of these ideas has been a bit lagging behind, and it's most likely due to the lack of infrastructure related to financing. So I think there is a need for building a success history or history of successes within the field, and I truly hope that we are on the path of being one of those great successes that would then enable others also to get the required talents and resources to do drug development also in Finland.
For people who are unfamiliar with Herantis Pharma, why don't you give me an overview of the company? How did it get started and what makes it different?
Yeah, so Herantis Pharma, as mentioned, based in Finland, Helsinki. We are developing disease-modifying therapies to address the unmet clinical need in Parkinson's disease. So our lead asset, HER96, is potentially a game-changing therapy that could become the first disease-modifying therapy for Parkinson's disease, potentially even neurorestorative treatment. And actually, Parkinson's disease was the original target already when the company was established already 2008 on a discovery of an unconventional neurotrophic factor. That's natural role is to protect neurons, especially dopaminergic neurons, and that was then the company was established based on that discovery, and the company in its early stages developed that neurotrophic factor through preclinical and actually clinical studies also in fairly advanced Parkinson's patients. Fairly nice results, or actually very promising results. But the challenge with the neurotrophic factor was that it's a protein and we had to administer that intracranially. So basically installing a capillary system within the brain of Parkinson's patients. And regardless of the promising results, it was evident that we cannot commercialize in large scale this kind of a treatment. There are more than 10 million people suffering from Parkinson's disease globally, and then you cannot imagine having a neurosurgical operation for these patients to install the capillary system for administration. And now the current asset that we have, HER96 we call it, is a peptide mimic of that protein, and the peptide mimic passes through the blood-brain barrier, so we can inject that subcutaneously in the abdomen area, and we have efficient brain penetration using that. So very patient-friendly way of delivering the activity of that neurotrophic factor to deliver its potential effect for Parkinson's disease treatment.
I'm going to get to HER96 in a minute because it really is fascinating the work you're doing there. But maybe you can first clarify. You talk about disease-modifying therapies. You're not talking about cures here. Can you put that in context with relation to Parkinson's? Why do we talk about disease-modifying?
Yes. So first of all, Parkinson's disease is a disease of degenerating dopaminergic neurons deep in the brain area called striatum, and the degeneration results in Parkinson's disease and the symptoms related to that, both motor symptoms like tremor or falls or such things, and also non-motor symptoms. And currently, the disease diagnostics is based on the appearance of the first symptoms, and then based on the symptoms, you can then diagnose that, okay, this subject has Parkinson's disease. There are treatments currently available for Parkinson's disease, but they only treat the symptoms, and they are normally efficacious also only in the early stage of the disease after the diagnosis. But currently, there is no treatments that can affect the disease progression. So regardless of the current treatments, the disease always progresses, and at some point of time beyond the point that you can actually properly manage the symptoms, and then it results in very much compromised quality of life. And we want to be among the first ones, or even the first one, who can actually stop or slow down the disease progression. That would be a game-changing therapy for Parkinson's disease.
Now, Herantis has already secured some funding, including a €3.6 million grant from the Michael J. Fox Foundation, Parkinson's Virtual Biotech, to help fund the trials of HER96. How important are these partnerships to the work that you're doing, both on an operational level, but also on a credibility level?
Yeah, so currently we are running a phase 1b clinical study. That is a study where HER96 is for the first time administered into Parkinson's patients for 1 month. And of course, this is still a phase 1 study, so the primary objective is to assess the safety and tolerability, but of course we have ambitions beyond that. Having the Michael J. Fox Foundation and Parkinson's UK supporting, or actually they are paying for the whole phase 1b study, is of course an extremely important external validation for a small company like Herantis. We are working with a very novel, innovative mechanism of action. No one else is utilizing the same biology as we are, and these patient organizations, they have done a very thorough assessment of the science behind, and their assessment has been that yes, Herantis and then the lead asset HER96 truly has a great potential to address the unmet clinical need, and absolutely crucial for going forward, that for investor community and potential pharma partnering, it is extremely important that we have this external validation from these very well-known organizations.
And finally, before we get to the asset itself, how do you actually position yourself in that landscape of Parkinson's research? There are not a lot of companies that are moving towards eventually phase 2 trials. Where do you fit, and how do the others differentiate themselves from you, and how do you stand out?
Yeah, we need to go a bit into the Parkinson's pathology to address this question. So, in Parkinson's disease, one of the hallmarks of the pathology is the accumulation of toxic protein aggregates, so alpha-synuclein aggregates. And for the past maybe 10, 15 years, the mainstream of the attempts for disease-modifying therapies in Parkinson's disease has been addressing these toxic protein aggregates by using normally antibodies that would recognize and then neutralize these protein aggregates. And there are many large companies like Roche who are in a way addressing this type of a treatment. So far, no great success, as none of these candidates have been commercialized. Some promising signals, yes, But if we compare HER96 and what we are proposing, we have much wider mechanism of action. We are targeting more widely the disease processes behind Parkinson's disease. So we believe that we have the much better probability of success as we are addressing simultaneously several aspects of the pathology. And we are currently planning coming phase 2 studies, so we are at the forefront of the development globally, which is of course a great position for a Finnish biotech company, that we are in a major indication in the forefront of the development.
Okay, so let's dive into HER96, your lead product. Can you explain how it actually works and why the subcutaneous administration and this blood-brain penetration that you talked about, why these are such significant breakthroughs for treating the disease?
Yes. So let's start with the brain penetration. Of course, in Parkinson's disease, the target tissue is located deeply in the brain, an area called striatum, and the brain is protected by so-called blood-brain barrier. So the blood vessels in the brain has a certain epithelium or barrier, physical barrier, that prevents harmful substances to enter the brain tissue. And that also creates a barrier for pharmaceuticals to enter the brain tissue. And especially when talking about biologicals or larger molecules like proteins or antibodies, it can be really challenging to get these compounds crossing the blood-brain barrier. And that is likely one of the biggest reasons why there hasn't been any true breakthroughs in Parkinson's disease or other neurodegeneration to in a way in the development of disease-modifying therapies, how to get the drug into the tissue where it should go. And we have solved this challenge by having a small peptide that mimics the activity of the protein, and having a peptide that has very efficient properties to get through the blood-brain barrier. And we have shown in a robust way in preclinical and clinical settings that the subcutaneous administration dose will go very efficiently into the central nervous system. So we are in a unique position being able to deliver the activity of a neurotrophic factor, a protein, to the brain. So that's important. And then regarding the mechanism of action, in Parkinson's disease, no one knows actually what triggers the disease, but much is known about what are the processes within the target neurons once the disease process is ongoing. And we know that there is a vicious cycle involving the accumulation of the toxic protein aggregates, cell stress, and inflammation in the brain tissue, and this vicious cycle in a way results in first the target neurons lose their functional abilities, and eventually they die because of this process. And this degeneration is a process that in a way currently takes place in the brain tissue, and nothing can prevent that. And there, HER96 comes into play because it addresses all these three different aspects that I mentioned. It addresses the cell stress, balancing a process called proteostasis, so how proteins, the building blocks of the cells, are handled by the neurons, a crucial process that is very important for the cells. And then it also addresses the alpha-synuclein aggregation, so we can prevent the aggregation. And at the same time, we prevent the neuroinflammation by addressing the glial, so-called glial cells, the immune cells within the brain. So we can break down the vicious cycle caused by these three different aspects. And we have shown this in a very robust way in preclinical settings. And we also have evidence from previous studies, clinical studies with the CDNF, the neurotrophic protein, that we can do this also in Parkinson's patients. So basically we have all the ingredients there. Of course, now we are in a phase 1 clinical study, but of course the next step would be to go into phase 2 studies to really demonstrate the clinical efficacy in patients.
Yeah, you said you're in this phase 1b trial that's for safety, it's for tolerability, but you must also be tracking some biomarkers there. Which ones are you exploring, and how can that actually contribute to and shape the future trials that you'll be doing?
Yeah, so beyond the safety and tolerability, we are definitely following the signs and symptoms of Parkinson's disease using the normal clinical measures, but then we also utilize digital devices for continuous monitoring of the patients and especially their symptoms. And this type of continuous measurement is most likely the future in Parkinson's disease and potentially also in other neurodegenerative diseases. And would be great to see a signal there, but of course the study is still a phase 1 study and not powered for any efficacy signal. But then, of course, biomarkers, they are a key for further development. And as we are addressing a novel mechanism, we need to create those biomarkers ourselves. So an early signal that showing that we are changing the target pathway. And that's our primary interest in phase 1b biomarkers, that we would identify molecules that indicate that we have changed the target pathway. And we are addressing this by in a way, using 2 different approaches. We have certain pre-selected biomarkers that we follow from the cerebrospinal fluid or blood. And then in addition to those pre-selected candidate biomarkers, we have a hypothesis-free analysis of different sample types to identify potentially novel biomarkers that would show the same, so the change in the target pathway. And it is important to be able to show the change in the target pathway as the first step in the cascade that would eventually lead into or result into improved symptoms. So that is in a way the first part of the evidence chain, and that is important for pharmaceutical industry and also for regulatory discussions, that we would be able to show that now in phase 1b and utilize those biomarkers later on in the clinical development in phase 2 and beyond.
You talked before about how it's a really complex neurodegenerative disease, and also how the mission of the company is to be a disease modifier. Is it possible to modify it to the point where Parkinson's will stop a progression, or that it will even reverse the progression? Is that something you have in the long-term plan?
Yes, our plan and the data that we have supports the hypothesis that we could actually be able to completely stop the progression at the early stage of the disease. In preclinical settings, we have actually shown that we have a regenerative effect on those neurons that have lost their functional phenotype, so they don't function properly anymore, but they are still alive, and we can in a way reprogram them into functional dopaminergic neurons. So we can have a certain degree of improvement in the disease. However, total restoration of all the activity, so we can't revitalize those cells that have been dead, and those dopaminergic neurons are cells that they are not regrown or reborn in the body. So there is a limited amount of them, and when we start losing them, we don't gain new ones unless we implant new cells directly into the target area.
What about using HER96 in combination with other therapies like levodopa, for example? Is there a chance that these are going to be deployed together and that it'll become part of a common therapy?
This is actually one of the benefits of HER96. It has, at least so far, very clean safety profile, easy administration, and it is very suitable for combination therapies. And actually in clinical settings, already in phase 1b, we have allowed to have that the patient can have like ongoing levodopa treatment, and on top of that, they can have HER96. And that's also the plan going forward, that our target population going into, let's say, commercial use would be early stage Parkinson's patient, either de novo without any existing medication, or with early stage first line or second line treatments with, for example, levodopa. And on top of that, we could use HER96 to, in a way, stabilize the situation or even have clinical improvement because of HER96.
Let's talk a little bit about that population. You mentioned the millions of people, is it 10 million people? What's really the current unmet need for patients, and how are you going to help address that?
Yeah, there are 10 to 12 million people suffering from Parkinson's disease, over 1 million new diagnoses every year. While many of these new patients can be treated in the, let's say, early stage of the disease, every single Parkinson's patient, they know that there will be the point in time, maybe 5 years, maybe 3 years, maybe 10 years, when the current treatments are not sufficient to manage their symptoms. And then we see a rapid decline in quality of life. So that's always known. And it results in that the patients are not capable of being in a work life, or they need to discontinue to do their hobbies. They can't, in a way, do their normal things in daily life. And that day will come to almost every single Parkinson's patient currently. So that's the unmet clinical need. So basically, every single Parkinson's patient would require this kind of a treatment, if not today, then tomorrow.
So is the goal then to change the mentality a little bit from treating symptoms to modifying the disease?
I would say yes and no. I think the mentality of at least those patients and patient organizations that we have discussed with, I think everybody from that side think that this is the only and right way to go forward. So there is, in a way, a strong motivation from the patients that this is something that has to be the future of Parkinson's disease treatment. And then maybe from drug development point of view, the bigger question is how you what is the clinical proof, how you can have regulatory approval, and what are the measures for getting new drugs on the market. And that will be, of course, something that we need to address along our clinical development path.
You mentioned earlier the importance of advocacy groups and patient groups in attaching some validation to the work that you're doing. Do they have other roles in actually shaping the research and shaping the conversation more broadly with regulators and with governments and with payers?
Yeah, absolutely. Their role is very important. Currently, it is extremely important to involve patients and patient organizations into design of clinical trials. And that's also like mandated by the regulatory authorities. So eventually, when we are proceeding towards phase 2-3 trials, that will be, in a way, a very important aspect in the development program, that we have the right measures for the patient point of view, because eventually what we want to do is that the quality of life for the patient is improved. So of course we need to have their involvement to create the right measures for having that information available when we then eventually apply for marketing approval.
Let's talk about that future then. If we're looking forward, say in the next 5 years or so, particularly with HER96's progression towards these phase 2 trials, these partnerships that you're building, where do you see Herantis being in 5 years' time?
Yeah, in the ideal future, in 5 years' time, we would have a global pharma taking the last steps in HER96 development towards Parkinson's disease. So we would have done a let's say collaboration, maybe licensing or something like that with big pharma to have a global access of HER96 to Parkinson's disease. But at the same time, the company Herantis, we would exploit the same biology in other indications in neurodegeneration like Alzheimer's or ALS, but also beyond neurodegeneration, as we have a lot of evidence on the same biology being important part of many disease processes. And as mentioned, we are currently the only company addressing this biology in clinical settings in neurodegeneration. So we potentially have much like bigger future than Parkinson's disease. Even Parkinson's disease is very large indication, but we have great opportunities beyond.
What about the opportunities for the biotech industry in the Nordics there? I know you mentioned earlier there were some problems when it comes to funding infrastructure or some challenges there. What does the sector need to do in the Nordics to move its way up the food chain a little bit, to be a leader, to be a place where people turn to for the best science and the best emerging innovation?
Yeah, we would need to see a change in, or we would need to see successes and building the culture, not only on the financial side, but also we need to have people who have been involved in doing these success stories, to educate the whole ecosystem from the academic research through the research done in smaller companies, but also within the investment community, to understand what are the timelines and what are the realistic expectations. As of course in drug development, the time frame is a bit different from many other industries. We are not talking about what you can achieve in 3 months or 6 months. We need to look much longer time periods, but of course the upside can be substantial, and also the in a way the impact that you can make on societies is also much greater, which hopefully will be and is part of the motivation for also the investors to invest in drug development.
It's one of those real challenges, though. To get the success, you need a first mover. You need someone who's built there, born there, working there, and achieves that success. Are there acts that governments can do? Are there acts that public institutions can take in order to help drive that forward?
Yeah, actually in Finland and in Nordics, I think that the public sector and the governmental policies have been very supportive for building also successful biotechs. But it is really the interplay between this and then the private investment sector, and how to attract investors, let's say outside of the Nordics, to invest in Finland from Europe, but also from US and Asia. And of course, I think we have seen lately that the attractiveness of the whole like European biotech has increased, and there is maybe more efficient use of capital in Europe compared to some other countries like US. If you just look at what are the sizes of fundraisers and what is sometimes achieved maybe more efficiently in Europe. And at least I've seen a continuous shift towards like Europe being more attractive, more and more attractive over the past maybe 10 years. And I think Finland and Nordics is in a way following the European trend there. So we are still part of European Union and exploiting the same mechanisms as with the rest of the Europe.
I know it's really difficult to do, but if we can imagine HER96, you find that pharma partner, you take it to market, it's commercialized. Can you give me an idea of what it will look like for a Parkinson's patient? What's the quality of life outcome going to be if this approach works out?
Yeah, ideally speaking, if we are not touching the diagnostics, but we in a way assume that the diagnostics is based on the appearance of the first mild symptoms as currently. The patient would have a Parkinson's disease diagnosis, start taking HER96 administrations or injections maybe twice a week. And after some time, maybe half a year or 12 months, the symptoms, even the mild symptoms would be a bit milder. And then the patient will take HER96 medication for the rest of his or her life, and the situation related to Parkinson's disease would be just stable, allowing just the normal life.
All right,
that would
amazing.
Be the ideal situation.
It does sound amazing. Antti, finally, how can listeners stay updated on your progress, and where can they learn more about your work?
Yes, so Herantis is actually a public company, so we have very open policy about telling our story. So you can find information on our website, which is continuously updated. We also have LinkedIn profile, and we post there all our news. And I'm sure that doing that, all the audience can be really much updated about what is happening and what is the future development.
Fantastic. Antti, thank you for joining us today on Beyond Biotech.
Thank you.
That's it for this episode. Don't forget to check out all the latest news and analysis at Labiotech.eu. I hope wherever you are in the world, you have a great week ahead. Thanks for listening, and I hope you'll join us again next time for another Beyond Biotech.